2 years later, again, the patient presented with worsening fatigue. She now had some weight loss as well. She found it difficult keeping up with her activities of daily living, so her performance status had worsened to a 1, an ECOG score of 1. She had cytopenias again. Now her LDH was elevated. So things were clearly progressing symptomatically. Imaging again demonstrated diffuse lymphadenopathy as well as some diffuse uptake in the liver. The SUV max was in the 7 to 9 range. So again, no real concern for diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, although the symptoms are clearly more significant than they had been in the past. She was started on idelalisib 150 milligrams twice daily based on those information. After 3 months of taking idelalisib, her imaging had improved significantly as well as her symptoms. She felt much better within the first month or two. Unfortunately, after about 6 months of taking idelalisib, she started to develop some watery diarrhea with a little bit of cramping, and that was worsening over time to about 5 or 6 bowel movements a day throughout the day that were starting to affect her quality of life in a rather significant way. On that basis, we felt that it was reasonable to hold the idelalisib for a period of time and wait for her symptoms to improve. Some people have considered the use of oral steroids or budesonide under these circumstances. In this case, she improved relatively quickly within about a month without any significant intervention. And then guidelines are to consider whether or not to restart idelalisib at a lower dose. Third-line therapy in follicular lymphoma is again similar to first and second line in that we go through all of the same considerations. Is there transformation? In this case, we think no. Does the patient need therapy? Observation is still absolutely a reasonable option in people with relapsed follicular lymphoma, regardless of the line, second, third, whatever, fifth relapse. If they're asymptomatic, observation remains reasonable. However, in this case, the patient was clearly having some symptoms. Her cytopenias were worse. She had an elevated LDH, so treatment was clearly indicated. Under those circumstances, you have to ask yourself, are we going to continue to do something similar to the past, or should we do something different? So we have all of the same options as before. Single agent rituximab, probably not a great choice in this case given her symptoms. Rituximab or obinutuzumab plus chemotherapy, reasonable options. She had a pretty good response to bendamustine rituximab. If we don't think she's transforming, maybe we're not picking our chop quite at this point. We might be waiting for the future in case she does have some sort of transformation. Again, my bias is not to repeat bendamustine plus rituximab, although there's some literature that says that it can be done in some circumstances. She's already had lenalidomide, so that's probably not the best choice. There are 2 drugs that are approved by the FDA for people who have received 2 prior therapies. Both of them are PI3 kinase inhibitors, specifically idelalisib and copanlisib. PI3 kinase inhibitors are rational in that they do what you would want a lymphoma drug to do. They interfere with the interactions between lymphoma cells and the microenvironment. And importantly, they have a mechanism of action that's completely different than prior lines of therapy. In other words, if we think that she's resistant to the other mechanisms of action that she's received before, using a drug that works differently makes sense. And importantly, PI3 kinase inhibitors have developed or have demonstrated activity in phase 2 clinical trials in this setting.